Well, we're joined, as I say, by Michael McGrath, Fianna Fáil's finance spokesman, to talk about his party's bill, which is coming before the Dáil this evening. The problem, and I think everybody recognises that it's still a problem, is that there are large numbers of people, particularly in long-term arrears. That number is not really coming down.
Yeah, that really is a key problem, Brian, and you have about 118,000 family home mortgages currently in arrears, and almost half of those, about 60,000, are in arrears of 1 year or more, and about 37,000 of that 60 are in arrears of 2 years or more. So those are people who are facing the very real prospect of repossession, and we are seeing the banks now really ramping up the level of enforcement activity. And on any given day now in a circuit court in any town in Ireland, you are witnessing hundreds, in some cases, of repossession applications by the banks. So this is a really serious crisis which needs to be dealt with.
Partly driven by the rise in property prices, it's suspected, because the banks now see an opportunity to get back what they're owed.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if there is equity in the property, if the value of the home now exceeds the mortgage, then the bank will see an opportunity to get all of the money back that they are owed. And I think that has emboldened the attitude of the banks and has resulted certainly in additional enforcement activity. So there's a very serious issue here which needs to be dealt with.
There is an insolvency service. Legislation was brought in to try to deal with this, to create a situation in which banks and their lenders and these financial advisors sit down and hammer out a deal. But you say that isn't working.
It's not working anywhere near as well as it could, and Fianna Fáil comes at this from the perspective of wanting the insolvency service to work and be successful. And at the very outset, 3 years ago or so, we pointed out this flaw to the government, as did others, that essentially the bank currently retain a veto, that any proposed settlement of somebody's indebtedness, including a mortgage, will require the consent of the bank in the vast majority of cases. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing such a tiny number of cases come through. Less than 200.
But that's there because it's the bank that's owed the money.
The bank is owed the money, and other creditors are owed the money as well. And that is why an independent statutory body was set up to look at the totality of a person's debts and to arrive at what is a fair solution. But a number of the main banks in Ireland have publicly said that they will veto any proposals which involve writing down mortgage debt, for example. So our bill...
I think Bank of Ireland, Ulster Bank, they've taken a pretty tough line on this. Allied Irish Bank, perhaps less so. They've been more willing to actually write down debt, to write off some of the debt.
Yeah, that is happening in certain cases, but there's no transparency around the decision-making on that issue, and there's a distinct lack of consistency. Now, the central bank and the government have really let the banks off the hook here, because they set these targets that the banks had to achieve, whereby they had to offer so many mortgage holders a sustainable solution. But in about 30,000 cases, the bank said, we've issued a threatening legal letter, that is the sustainable solution.
The Taoiseach had a couple of things to say about it. He said the government isn't taking your bill on board, and the two reasons he gave was, one, because it would force people into the courts, where presumably they don't want to be in this kind of situation, and B, it isn't constitutional what you're proposing.
Well, first of all, it is government policy and government inaction that is resulting in thousands of ordinary families ending up in the courts. And the Taoiseach doesn't seem to understand the insolvency process as it stands. Any arrangement which is currently agreed has to be approved by the court. So we are simply mirroring that provision, but we are removing the bank veto. And, you know, I have to question whose constitutional rights the Taoiseach is seeking to protect. It's certainly not the rights of ordinary families around the country.
You have advice, legal advice, have you, that this is consistent with the Constitution?
Yes, we do. And if the government is contrary advice, then let's put it to the people.
All right, Michael McGrath, there we leave it. Thank you.